All right, we are live and we're going to roll the title.
Still Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Villanova Tip Time, a very special NIT edition of the Villanova Men's Basketball pregame show presented by the Nova Insider Network. I am here with some familiar faces who I'm super excited to have join me tonight ahead of some, hey, it's March, baby. It's March postseason basketball. I don't care what you tell me. With me, I have Chris Bellotti from the Full 40 and Chris Lane of OGViewHoops.com fame. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Doing good. I actually made it in time. I stopped at the post office, mailed back in our, blue blood card and gave it to everybody because apparently accepting an NIT bid is a problem for some folks. But I got that done so everyone can be happy. So now we're good to go for the NIT.
And I'm just fulfilling a lifelong dream of watching an NIT game.
Yeah.
I think there's plenty to discuss tonight, plenty to look forward to tonight, as much as we're probably going to make jokes. Plenty to look forward tonight. I'm excited to watch some Villanova basketball. I'm excited to hopefully watch some of the younger guys get some more opportunities, given that you're without our top two starters. But we got plenty of that to get into in a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about how we got here overall. We're going to talk about some of the big storylines going on the last couple of days that aren't necessarily NCAA tournament related. We're going to talk about Big East teams and the NCAA tournament. And then we're going to round it out by talking about the NIT, our NIT draw, introduce Liberty, and talk about tonight's game. So we got a lot of ground to cover for 30 minutes, but I think it probably makes sense to start off with how we got here. And I think it's important to point out that the Villanova team that we saw down the stretch in February was very different than the Villanova team that we had seen up until that point. But it unfortunately ended up being too little too late for the Cats as they fell in the quarterfinals of the Big East tournament against Creighton in a conference tournament that they were going to almost certainly have to win to get into the NCAA field. And that's where we found ourselves on the far outside looking in during the selection. So really for the first time that I can remember, that there was just no hope watching the selection show and waiting for that NIT show later on. Bellotti, I'm going to come to you first. I guess how did we get here? Talk about kind of how you're feeling heading into this sort of postseason / off season, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise.
Yeah, look, I think this is going to be probably, if you thought last off season was interesting with the retirement of Jay Wright, this might be punch for punch just as interesting. It'll certainly be a lot more. There won't be one big news story. There'll be a lot of news stories to follow in the off season. But how we got here is an understandable, series of circumstances that led to us not winning what I'll call the hinge games of the season. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, maybe a little bit later, but there was a handful of games that you can point to that we didn't win, that if you flip those results, we're sitting here as maybe an 8-9 or a 10-11 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, you can go down the list.
Fuller and DePaul away, right? It's really just
Marquette at home. There was a number of games that you just flip one way or the other, and you're looking at a different circumstance. But nevertheless, those are games that in the past we have won. There was certainly an understandable set of circumstances that led to kind of not winning those games. But the reality of the situation is that we are entering a postseason that will be followed by probably followed by news one way or the other. We've already seen that, Cam and Justin aren't playing tonight. One of the assistant coaches is being looked at for a head coaching job elsewhere. And so we know that news is coming. And so right now my focus is just kind of watching these Cats and try and see how long they can kind of hang together in this NIT run.
Yeah, Chris Lane, I want to kick it to you. Before I do that, I do want to call out something small that was posted by Adam Zagoria, Zag's blog. So I think writes for NJ.com and the New York Post now. He reported kind of a series today of tweets saying that, Cam and Justin weren't going to be playing, but then later he confirmed that they're traveling with the team. And that's I think that's a big culture win. Like it'd be really just, say what you will about them playing versus not playing. I think the three of us here are all in agreement that it's the right move, especially if there is any sort of injury issue at play. And even if there's not, it's probably still the right move for Cam at the very least. But just the fact that they're traveling with the team and there's like a team togetherness and sort of a team unity through the adversity is, I think, a sign to me that the Villanova culture is alive and well, even if the end result on the season wasn't exactly what we were looking for. But Chris Lane, I don't want to cut you off. Jump in. Give me your thoughts on kind of the season at large.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on the culture thing. Like I was pretty confident, just having talked to a couple people that I thought would have known that Justin Moore wasn't going to play at all this year. And so I think it speaks volumes about his character, his desire to, be, a piece of continuity in what is clearly a transition year for the program. And there might be another next season, but him coming back and playing as long as he possibly could. I mean, game one was near 30 minutes a game. Maybe I have to go look at it, but I'm pretty sure he was playing 30 minutes a night from the moment he came back, which is pretty wild. And I don't begrudge him at all if he's not feeling right. If he feels like maybe that injury is acting up, like don't play, don't risk anything. You already fought your way all the way back. It's not worth it to risk it for what is possibly just one more game. And same thing with Cam Whitmore. Like, I don't know. There's no math to me on this one. If he is even a potential lottery pick and he's almost certainly a first round pick, that's a lot of guaranteed money that you are risking, right? I wouldn't expect him to compete at the combine either. And we've seen this in college football, like guys who are in the college football playoff, they go and play because you have a shot to win a national championship. Guys who are playing in New Year's Six bowls, meaningless bowls, like it does not matter. It is not worth it. Just take the rest. Don't risk anything. So I have a hard time really getting, any sort of feelings about them not playing. And I know certain people, like, that's not what you want to see. You want to see guys compete with their team and all of that. But I would assume that their teammates also understand that decision. Clearly, a lot of the former Villanova guys today, Colin, Allen, Daniel, all got out there and were like, no, like 100% the right decision. That does not make sense to do that. Season as a whole, like ending up in the NIT, if you had told me back when we knew Cam was injured to start the season, Justin was out for a while, and we dealt with Jordan Longino being out for a while as well. You told me we went through all of that, I probably would have told you we're not making the NIT. So I think this is a reasonable finish to the season, just given that context. And hindsight's 2020. I think I was one of the few people early in the season that was just kind of like, this is going to be a different season than the one we're used to. It's not going to be, win 25, 30 games, cruise through the conference. This is going to be a grind. And I think it went maybe even a little worse than I thought. But again, it was one thing after the other. It felt like from really December to when Justin Moore came back, and it finally all clicked together. And then we saw that this team is not bad by any stretch when everybody's fully healthy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and going to give you that shout out because you definitely were very early on the rational takes of like, whoa, let's calm it down, because it just sort of seemed like a lot of dramatics from the fan base early on when things weren't going our way. But to Kyle Neptune and staff's credit, they say the goal is to be playing the best basketball by the end of the year. I know that literally and technically that means the last game of the year and cutting down nets. But I think in a macro sense, that's exactly what this team and the program was able to achieve on the season arch. One of the things that we're obviously going to get a lot more into the NIT and the game at what to expect from the game tonight and ahead of us. But I do something you said I want to latch onto and kind of switch gears towards, which was about the college football bowl season, and it spurs this thought of just what a ridiculous portal frenzy we've seen over the last couple of days. Like literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players entering the portal. Now all of these players coming from teams where their season is over. But it's been a really interesting dynamic because you essentially have a free agency frenzy period that feels very much like NFL free agency, which is also opening tomorrow officially, right? Except there are, still over 100 teams playing postseason basketball between the NCAA tournament and the NIT, and it's total chaos. Whereas in college football, 90+% of bowl games are totally meaningless, and therefore there's no comparison to pro playoffs. Pro leagues force teams and players to wait for any sort of free agency to begin until after the championship or the postseason is decided. So college basketball is very much a special snowflake in that regard, and we're starting to see some of the chaos really just explode. And I think both of you guys are with me, and like it's almost overwhelming to just see every time somebody hits the portal that's either a big man that looks like, because everybody in the Nova fan base desperately wants another big man to pair with Eric Dixon so he can play the 4. Anytime any player is like linked to the Philly region, anytime somebody averages over like 18 points, it's like Nova. This guy would be great for Nova, but it's getting out of control. Chris Lane, I'm going to come to you first. What are you thinking about this?
Yeah, we were talking kind of pre-show about this. I think this is the market that the NCAA has set up. A scholarship is annually renewable. These are not multi-year contracts you're signing people to. So if you're going to put a single-year contract in front of somebody that has an annually renewable scholarship, and the thought behind that is like stay in good academic standing, don't get in trouble, be a good teammate, yada yada yada. But if you're only giving them a 1-year deal, like I don't know how you expect people to not treat that as an actual 1-year deal. Everybody wants to go, theoretically, everybody, or most high-level college players think they have a shot at playing professionally, and so they want to continue to look for the best situation for them. Just like you or I or Chris Bellotti over here, like we have a job. If we're an at-will employee and we find something better, like we give our 2 weeks notice and we leave and we go do that. We're really pretending at this point that this is not big, high-level business, really. Getting these kids and all the media revenue attached and all the NIL stuff now, like there's just no sense in trying to call this amateur sports, in my opinion. So I don't have a problem with the transfer portal per se, because I think a program like Nova, generally speaking, is built on the values that are going to keep players invested there, right? It's known as a developmental program. It's known as a place that is really all about family and brotherhood and all the right kind of core values that you want to be recruiting against. But we are going to lose guys from time to time, right? We lost Angelo Brizzi this year. I don't think that is anything to do with his attitude or a lack of belief, in him. It's just him going, I can read the tea leaves. Brendan Howson's come in. He looks great. Mark Armstrong looks great. I'm going to have a hard time ever being the guy here. And so I don't begrudge him for that. Mm-hmm. The one issue that you, I think, raised, I don't want to steal your thunder, is just the timing of it all is kind of crazy at this point. We used to live in a world where like the season ended and then this stuff all kind of happened. And right now it's like, well, as soon as your season ends, you're free to get in the transfer portal. People are free to start talking to you. That goes for coaches as well, obviously. And it does create a little bit of a hectic atmosphere around, one of the biggest sporting events of the year.
Yeah. Bellotti, I want to come to you next.
Yeah. I mean, Chris Lane said a lot of what I would have said. John Fanta had this comment, and I really agree with it. It's just like, look, portal's fine. Everything's fine. Like whatever. But really, it takes away. It honestly is starting to take. And I say this as someone who is like in there being like, hey, at Kyle Neptune, look at this guy. Like because you got to be part of it. You got to deal with the system that you're in. At the same time, it does take away from the NCAA tournament. Even though we're not in it, it does take away from the shine of the tournament a little bit. That you have teams with players, TCU, Pitt comes to mind, of like people who were on a team that's in the NCAA tournament that's announcing and entering the transfer portal. That just feels chaotic. And It does feel chaotic for the Cooley Georgetown thing, which I know you want to talk about, but like it's just like the whole thing feels chaotic. I just really wish that there could be like a moratorium for at least like 2 weeks, right? Like get to the Final Four, like that's a different story. And by that time, there's only so few teams involved that like I don't care if that starts getting ramped up at that point in time. But just for like a couple weeks, guys, let this breathe for a little bit. It's too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's definitely it's like something we're gonna have to get used to. Like I think the horse is out of the barn on this one.
Oh yeah.
I've seen like numbers tweeted anywhere between like 250 and 500 players in the portal over the last couple days. Like that number could theoretically continue to go up. I think it'll stabilize at some point because there are only so many players in college basketball. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about you kind of foreshadowed the Cooley Providence thing. I'm gonna hold that until we get into the NCAA men's tournament. Really quick, the other big storyline from the week that we do not want to overlook is the Villanova women's team, 4 seed, which is, I believe, they were once recently, not recently, but it's their second tied for their best possible seed, their best historical seeding. They're going to host the first 2 games of the women's NCAA tournament, which don't have round of 64 and 32 host sites. So you're going to be NCAA tournament games at the Finn. Huge shout out to Villanova women who have had a literally generational season and an extra generational player in Maddie Siegrist, all-time leading Big East scorer, men's and women's. Yeah, guys, I want to give you a word on this if you've got one, but what else is there to say? The Villanova women's team has done us so proud this year.
I think the Villanova women have a legitimately good path too. First of all, you play your first 2 games at home, right? So by seeding expectations, Sweet 16 is kind of the run. But the one thing that's different about the women's tournament this year is that it's not just 4 regional sites hosted by the 1 seed. It's 4 regional sites. Sorry, it's 2 regional sites, each hosting 2 regions. And the one site that we're in is Greenville, South Carolina, I believe. And that's South Carolina's home. But Indiana, who's the 1 seed in our bracket, is down in Greenville with us. So we get through 2 games. I know Indiana's a 1 seed and is going to be a really tough out because women's college basketball just kind of works like that. It's like top 8, 9, 10 teams are like a step above, and then the next 20 down, which Denise Dillon's done a phenomenal job getting us into that. But we've beaten UConn before last year. Indiana is not like, look, I know the seeding is what it is and they have to seed it a certain way. I think we can match up with Indiana. Get past that, and anything could happen. Like we could wind up in Dallas, and then Cats in Texas is always a good mix.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Cats in Texas. I have not followed the season probably as closely as others. Followed kind of Maddie's journey to being the all-time leading scorer, and then kind of was in and out there at the end. But, I'm really rooting for them to make it to Greenville. I've got 2 young daughters. My 6-year-old is like dying to go to a Villanova game. So we'll definitely be driving up to Greenville if they make it that far. Awesome. And, Denise Dillon's killing it. I was interested to see what that program looked like moving on from Harry Peretta. It just like the men's program's going through, like you kind of just don't know. She's come in and is just crushing it right now. And getting those 2 home games, hopefully, bare minimum 1 o'clock, one of them 5 o'clock on a Saturday. Probably not else a lot going on with the Villanova University unless we're on spring break. I have no idea, but I would expect that to be a pretty crazy atmosphere given what the UConn game looked like. So I think it's awesome for the school, awesome for the students, and I hope everybody sticks with that team as far as they make it.
Amen to that. I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about the NIT draw and Liberty in tonight's game. Before I do that, I want to go around the horn and each kind of get one word on the NCAA tournament and any Big East shout outs, any Big East comments if you've got them. I'll start specifically on Big East storylines. I think my 2 are, 1, I would love the shit out of this Xavier team if Fremantle hadn't gone down. It's really hard for me to pick them to actually get to the Final Four and cut down the nets without Fremantle. But I think that's point number 1 is for their sake, what would have been. But we know that well, right? Last year, getting all the way there, making it to the Final Four, and with 90 seconds to go, losing our, one of our alphas and kind of limiting our ceiling there. The other storyline, which one of you guys foreshadowed a moment ago, is this Ed Cooley, Georgetown Providence business. An absolute distraction for Providence, who didn't need a distraction in an 11 seed facing a 6 seed Kentucky, who, even though it's not a great year for Kentucky, and they're probably not super deserving of a 6 seed, that's still a huge matchup for Providence, and they do not need distractions going into that. So really interested to see how those 2 things unfold. Bellotti, I'm going to come to you next. Kind of give us your top NCAA tournament highlight here.
Yeah, I think you've hit that right on the head. But I've said this for a long time. I obviously wish we were part of it. But the Big East has, for the last several seasons, and has had 6, 7 teams in. and just like about 4, 8, 9 seeds, it felt like every year. And so there was just like, you're just so limited playing from that seed line. I like where the Big East is at, right? Like Marquette's a 2 seed. Xavier's a 3. Those are teams that should make the second weekend. UConn as the 4, candidly, might be the better of them all, and is in a 4 seed. And I think, and is still remembering their 5 seed experience last year. Yep. So I think UConn's got a run in them too. And if Creighton gets hot, they could maybe knock off a 3 seed. So we'll see there. But this is kind of what I was asking for from the Big East. Like, okay, maybe you trim it down to 5 teams, but now all of a sudden you have 3 in the top 4 seed lines who can all make extended runs. And I think they will. I actually think this is going to be a banner year for the conference. Unfortunately, without us in it, but I think that's the headline for me.
You've really done it now. How could we ever win a game after a comment like that? I'm with you. I think it helps when you don't have 1 or 2 teams beating the ever-loving crap out of the rest of the conference, which is kind of what it felt like the last 4 or 5 years when it was us or us and another team just kind of running train on everybody. So I think, it helps to be on those seed lines. I'm a pretty strong believer that UConn will get into the second weekend. Pretty strong believer that Marquette will get it, into the Elite Eight, possibly into the Final Four. I think they're such a tough matchup. I said this in the Big East tournament. Like, I'm shocked. I was wrong about them. I'm shocked at how good they are and how well they're playing, and feels like they're peaking still at this point. I was curious to see how that matchup with UConn went. And then they just, went and killed Xavier. So they're peaking at the right time. And I think the conference is set up for, hopefully 3 teams into the second weekend, maybe more, would be, I think, a huge step forward for the conference and, some nice money in our pockets while we sit at home and don't do anything.
That's exactly right. And while I think we're all aligned that, as we are all invested, at least emotionally, in the Big East, we want to see the Big East do well. We should all be rooting for Big East teams in these games. Yep. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a little part of me that wants the Big East to miss Daddy in the tournament. Miss Daddy carrying the Big East name and getting them those extra units. And
I'll be laughing when somebody goes down for sure.
Look, yeah. I will. I'm definitely riding both sides of the fence on this one. But now to the glorious land of the nationally invited tournament, where Villanova will play tonight in Lynchburg, Virginia, against the Liberty Flames. I did see that we've got a Liberty Flames basketball account who retweeted the show. So we do have Liberty viewers. Respect to you for hosting this game. Respect to you for what seems to be a flame-throwing 3-point team. But let's talk about Liberty a little bit. Before I do that, let's talk about the NIT, just how it's structured, right? You've got 32 teams overall. You've got 16 of those teams seeded, 16 of those teams unseeded. So one of the plugs I have to throw in here is if Villanova were to win tonight and the team that lines up above them on the next bracket above, the seeded team would be Wisconsin. That would put Villanova playing in Madison, Wisconsin on Saturday. Little known fact, Villanova Tip Time headquarters here in Madison, Wisconsin. So if that were to come to pass, you're looking at the only person, really maybe not the only person, but probably the most excited that any human has ever been for an NIT game would be me, because Villanova would be coming to visit me in the city where I live, which is a unique opportunity. So got to plug that for the NIT structure. But first up, we've got the Liberty Flames, 26-8 co-champions of the AA Sun, lost in their conference game, thereby being assured a spot in the NIT. The NIT assures a spot to any teams that won their conference regular season but did not win their conference tournament, which is an interesting wrinkle for teams from power conferences that don't get in, like Villanova, like Florida, like Michigan, others that are in the NIT field this year. Dangerous mid-major team from 3. Top 4 scorers all averaging between 39 and 42% from 3, which is nasty. Top guy to know overall, Darius McGee, averaging more than 22 points a game, 3 boards, 3 assists to go with them. So that's kind of what to know about the Liberty Flames coming into this game. Gentlemen, how are you feeling? What are you looking for tonight out of this matchup against the Liberty Flames, and what you expect to see from the Cats? Bellotti, I'm coming to you first.
Energy and focus for the Cats. To me, that's what I'm looking for, right? Like, Look, I want this team to win 5 more games and host the NIT championship trophy in Vegas. But the reality of the situation is you just want to see how these guys compete down their 2 best players. And kind of with a disappointing result and having to go on the road to Liberty, who's going to be excited to have the opportunity to play Villanova in their home arena. This is, in my view, kind of like it's not an uncomfortable matchup. They play a slow tempo. So we won't be like playing up against somebody who's going to be running up and down the court. So we'll be comfortable tempo wise with them. But we're going to have to defend the 3, and we're going to have to defend it well. They shoot a ton. I think they shoot like the 6th most percentage of 3-pointers relative to their overall point distribution in the country. And they do that while playing slow. So it'll probably not be an uncomfortable matchup, but we got to get out on that 3-point line and defend the shit out of it. Pardon my French. And then on the other side, Dixon can do some work here because they're not terribly large, and we need to cover the glass, which has been a problem for this team all season long. And if you actually ask me what my number one nightmare of this team is the rebounding. So we just didn't seem to ever have that one guy who was able to, that one guard like the Hart and the Samuels and whatever before them, who was able to grab a ton of rebounds and kind of change the game on the glass. But we need to rebound well because they're going to be chucking a lot of shots, and we need to grab those boards. So do that, and I think we could be in a game with them close towards the end, and we'll see how we execute down the stretch without Justin or Cam.
Yeah, I was laughing when you said you're looking for energy because I was like, man, the pace of this thing could reasonably be in the high 40s if neither team is shooting all that well. For me, this is a callback to what the beginning of the season looked like. About 10 minutes ago, the team confirmed Moore and Whitmore are both out tonight. No surprise there. So you're going back to a lineup that really struggled offensively and at times looked like it didn't have guys who wanted to be the alpha dog on the court. So I'm interested to see who steps up tonight. I'm hoping that Mark Armstrong and Brandon Housen kind of just take it by the horns tonight and say, this is our team now. They're obviously going to be 2 of the leaders on next season's team. And realistically, at this point, may be like the 2 best guards that we feel comfortable playing with for large stretches. No offense to Chris Arch, who I think is a really good rotational piece and, a little underrated on the defensive side probably this year. But this is Mark and Brendan's team heading into next year, in my opinion. I want to see a lot out of them tonight. And then I agree with Chris. Eric Dixon should be able to get whatever he wants in the paint. I'm hoping that we feed that because he seems like a guy that the more touches he gets down there, when he gets them early, going in and starts to get that plethora of moves he's got in the post going, he's a guy that can put up 30 easily. And this is a game where possessions will be limited. We're going to have to make them count. He's probably one of the safer bets to get points on the board.
If I was personally playing this game as like a video game where I was controlling the team and what happened, I would want Eric Dixon and Brendan Housen to take 100% of the available shots. I can't echo the Eric Dixon sentiment harder. When you look at any of the coverage of Villanova storylines this week, heading into this game, what have you, it's Cam and Justin number 1, getting the senior send off for at least Slater and Caleb. And then the remaining fabulous freshmen in any particular order, right? It doesn't matter 1, 2, 3. Those are the 3 storylines. What about Eric Dixon? He's one of the best big men in the Big East. He has a matchup tonight on paper that is his most favorable matchup he's seen in literally months. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to Eric Dixon having a game. And like I said earlier, while we were kind of bantering before the game, I don't know if the limit exists for how many shots I want to see Brendan Housen take tonight. I want to see him get so much run. But I suppose if he takes like 20 shots, that means he's missed a lot of shots. So, I'm not trying to get crazy here. I just want to see Brendan Housen have a night and kind of use that flamethrower.
Let's have him go out there and get a 40 piece. Let's just do it.
Yeah. Brendan Housen drops a 40-burg in Lynchburg, Virginia. I think we're all going and happy to a game in Madison, Wisconsin on Saturday. No big deal. I will be insufferable if this happens. I must let you all know.
We'll give your address to everybody who's traveling up for the game.
Yeah. It's so funny. Once I realized the draw, I started texting some buddies, being like, "All right, who's coming to visit for NIT round 2?" And it's not, let's just say Wisconsin at the end of winter is not considered to be a spring break destination per se, but we're gonna sure as hell try to make it one this weekend. In any case, guys, that brings us right down to tip-off time on ESPN2 on the Worldwide Lead, back on the Worldwide Leader for the first time in a few months here. Really, really thankful to my guests, Chris Lane and Chris Bellotti, for joining me here tonight. Both really great friends of the program, doing great work out there. Can't plug Chris Bellotti and the Full 40 enough. They've done so much to support me in this program. And so, Chris, always so happy to have you on. And Chris Lane, OG, one of the founders of VUHoops.com, if I'm not mistaken. Stalwart in sort of the Villanova.
Getting my life back now that the kids are growing up, and we'll be more involved in Villanova stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. We love to see it. And we hope that this is not the last tip time of the season, although that would require the Cats to win a couple more games, because I will almost certainly be there in person on Saturday, and maybe planning a little bit of content for y'all if I'm able to be in the building, if that comes to pass. But for now, grab a refill on your beverage and your favorite spot to watch. Ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time.
Go Cats.